Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We are diving into the source material you've shared with us about a company that, well, it has a surprising and fascinating story.
Nokia.
Ah, Nokia.
Yeah,
Yeah, most people still think phones.
exactly.
Right.
The one that was the mobile phone giant. Well, their journey is much wilder than just phones. It actually started as a paper mill way back in
A
1865.
paper mill. It really is a story of constant evolution, a company that has transformed dramatically.
Absolutely. So, our mission today is really to extract the essential insights from these sources. We want to give you a clear, informed perspective on Nokia's strategic rebirth, what they're actually doing in the world today,
Hmm.
the incredible innovation engine they have with Bell Labs, this really significant macroeconomic tailwind they seem positioned to benefit from, and, ultimately what all of this suggests for Nokia's future and maybe the investment outlook.
Right. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to understanding the complex layers of this company, from its deep history right up to its cutting-edge future.
Exactly. Let's jump right into that incredible transformation journey because, yeah, when most people hear Nokia, they still think of that indestructible mobile phone.
And understandably so, they were iconic. But you're right, the story goes much, much further back, starting as that paper mill in Finland, 1865.
A paper mill, it's just wild. And then they spent decades diversifying, getting into rubber, cables, electronics, even military hardware.
Yeah, it seems disjointed looking back.
It does, but the sources suggest this period actually laid crucial groundwork, building expertise in manufacturing complex systems integration.
Right. They weren't building telecom networks back then, obviously, but they were building the industrial muscle and sort of the technical know-how that would be essential later.
Makes sense.
And then the real pivot happened in the 1990s.
Right, this is where they put all their chips, basically, on mobile phones and telecom infrastructure. A pretty dramatic narrowing of focus.
And wow, did it pay off spectacularly. They were genuine pioneers, making the world's first commercial 2G call.
The 3310. Exactly. Their phones, like the Nokia 3310, became global icons. And think about this. For a full decade, starting around 1998, they were the undisputed top vendor worldwide for both mobile phones and those early smartphones.
Total dominance. Just market leader everywhere.
But as the sources detail pretty clearly, this is also where they learned probably the hardest lesson. The smartphone revolution, well, it caught them flat-footed.
Yeah, this seems to be the critical moment. The sources really underscore the need for radical agility here.
Absolutely. A reluctance maybe to fully embrace software, sticking with their Symbian operating system too long.
Right, they missed the early Android wave.
Missed Android, and then that later, ultimately unsuccessful partnership with Microsoft for Windows Phone. It all just led to losing that dominant position step by step.
And it culminated, as we know, in the sale of their mobile phone business in 2014. A painful step, I imagine, but maybe necessary.
Seems so. The big takeaway here, highlighted in the sources, is the brutal importance of rapid adaptation and, well, visionary leadership when you face these huge disruptive technology shifts. Complacency just isn't an option.
No kidding.
And that tough lesson really fueled their current strategic pivot. After divesting the mobile phone unit, the focus shifted entirely to the business-to-business space. So telecom infrastructure, technology development, and leveraging their intellectual property.
So they stopped trying to sell us the phone and started focusing on building the invisible highways those phones connect to
Right.
and the underlying technology.
Exactly. They're now explicitly positioning themselves as a B2B tech innovation leader. They have this vision centered on creating networks that sense, think, and act, really pushing intelligence and sensing capabilities deep into the network itself.
Interesting phrase. Sense, think, and act.
Yeah, and a significant high-margin part of their value creation now comes from their vast intellectual property portfolio and their long-term fundamental research, which is primarily housed within, well, the legendary Nokia Bell Labs.
Okay, so that brings us neatly to Nokia today. What does the company actually look like right now, in terms of its different businesses, its financial health?
So structurally, Nokia is organized into four main business groups. First, there's mobile networks.
Okay.
This is really the backbone of cellular connectivity, providing the radio access network or RAN equipment. That's the stuff on the cell towers.
Uh-huh.
Plus, deployment services, ongoing support. Their goal here is leadership in 5G, and including the newer Open RAN and virtualized RAN technologies.
Right. So RAN is basically the radio gear connecting your phone to the network.
Yeah.
And open and virtualized RAN, that's about making the hardware and software more open, more flexible, right? Less locked in.
Exactly. It gives operators more flexibility, potentially more suppliers, and within mobile networks, they're also increasingly leveraging AI for network optimization. They've got solutions like Man-Array SO and Autopilot, which help manage and, improve network performance automatically.
Got it. Making the network smarter, more efficient. What's next?
Then there's network infrastructure. This group builds the high-performance foundational networks. Think data centers, IP/MPLS networks is how data packets get routed. Optical networks, using light for super-fast data transmission, and fixed networks like fiber to the home.
So the core plumbing of the internet, essentially.
Pretty much, they're preparing the digital highways for future demands. And the sources highlight a key move here: their acquisition of Infinera, which closed in Q1 2025.
Ah, yes. Infinera. What's the significance there?
Well, that acquisition significantly boosts their scale in optical networks. It particularly strengthens their position with large customers like hyperscalers, the companies building massive cloud data centers. It's really crucial for meeting the exploding data traffic needs we're seeing.
Makes sense. Okay, third group.
Third is cloud and network services. This unit provides the software and hardware that enable communication service providers, the CSPs, and also enterprises to transform their operations, move stuff to the cloud, create new services. It's focused on making networks more automated, more programmable.
So this sounds like things like autonomous network management, building out private networks for specific businesses, and maybe enabling this network as code idea, where developers can access network capabilities programmatically.
Precisely. Allowing customers to differentiate themselves and find new revenue streams beyond just basic connectivity. Finally, number 4 is Nokia Technologies.
Okay.
This is primarily the IP licensing arm. It's a relatively small segment in terms of revenue compared to the others, but it's very profitable. It generates revenue by licensing their extensive patent portfolio across various industries.
Right, so a steady, high-margin contributor to the bottom line from all that R&D investment over the years.
Exactly.
Who are their main customers across these different groups then?
Traditionally, of course, it's the communication service providers, the big phone companies, the telcos, but they're increasingly focused on enterprises, businesses of all kinds, and that's a growing segment, now accounting for over 10% of their net sales.
Interesting shift.
And critically, the public sector. This includes defense, federal government, public safety agencies, smart communities.
That public sector piece, especially defense, seems particularly relevant given what the sources suggest about some of the bigger macroeconomic trends. But before we get there, how have they actually been performing financially recently? What do the numbers say?
Well, it's definitely been a challenging market environment, as the sources make very clear. Net sales declined in both 2023 and 2024.
Yeah, the culprits mentioned seem pretty consistent across the whole industry, right? Macro uncertainty, high interest rates, leading operators to maybe cut back on spending, and operators also kind of digesting the equipment inventory they already bought.
Exactly. And the worldwide telecom equipment market itself saw a significant 11% decline in 2024, reportedly the steepest drop in over 2 decades for some segments. So, a tough market. It's been a broad market slowdown, no doubt. However, the sources also point to some signs of potential stabilization. Order trends were showing improvement towards the end of 2023, and that seemed to continue into the first quarter of 2025.
Okay, so maybe bottoming out, let's look at some specific numbers mentioned. Q4 2023 saw sales down, 21% year over year, but profitability seemed resilient with a 14.8% comparable operating margin. And they generated strong free cash flow that quarter, too.
That's right. And for the full year 2023, net sales were down 8%, but that enterprise segment, the one they're focusing on for growth, actually grew 16%, which demonstrates some success in that strategic focus area.
Okay, and then ending 2024, Q4 sales were actually up 9% year over year, which is a turnaround, and an excellent 19.1% comparable operating margin, though the full year 2024 sales were still down 9% overall.
Correct. Despite that overall sales dip for the year, Comparable operating profit for FY 2024 hit EUR 2.6 billion, which landed within their guidance range. And crucially, they ended 2024 with EUR 2.0 billion in robust free cash flow and a strong EUR 4.9 billion net cash position on the balance sheet.
Healthy cushion.
Yeah. And the network infrastructure segment, that foundational piece, showed solid recovery, growing 17% in Q4 2024.
Now, Q1 2025, the most recent numbers, had some bumps. Sales are down 3% constant currency year over year.
Right, and the comparable gross margin dropped. That was partly due to lower sales from Nokia Technologies, the licensing arm, but also significantly impacted by a EUR 120 million one-time contract settlement charge in mobile networks.
Those one-time charges can really sting.
They do. That charge particularly affected the comparable operating margin for the quarter, bringing it down to 3.6%. However, network infrastructure continued its positive trend with 11% growth, and cloud and network services grew 8% in Q1 2025, so some underlying strength there.
And cash flow.
They also generated EUR 0.7 billion in free cash flow in Q1, ending the quarter with EUR 3.0 billion in net cash. Still a very solid position.
Okay, so summing that up. While the market remains tough and those one-time charges are obviously painful, the underlying picture seems to show resilience, strong cash generation continues, and there's definite growth in key segments like enterprise and network infrastructure.
That's a fair assessment based on the sources, yeah.
What are the main challenges they face then, beyond just the market slowdown itself?
Well, competition is incredibly fierce. The market is dominated by giants like Huawei, Ericsson, and increasingly Samsung is a player too.
Right. Huawei is the global leader, particularly strong in China, obviously, while Ericsson and Nokia are roughly tied outside of China, each holding around, 20% market share?
Something like that, yeah. And the sources highlight a significant competitive challenge, particularly from Huawei's, what they call the Iron Triangle, strong government support back home, deep ties with Chinese operators, and often state-backed financing packages that can be really difficult for competitors to match, especially in developing markets.
Right. The subsidized financing makes it tough. Have there been operational challenges too?
There have. The sources mention the historical delays with their custom ReefShark chipsets for 5G. That impacted their initial market position, although they've since addressed this by working with partners.
Okay, so that's largely resolved.
Largely, yes. But that Q1 2025 charge is a reminder that operational issues or specific contract problems can still hit profitability unexpectedly.
Sure. And what about broader risks?
Supply chain issues and geopolitical risks also remain factors. The sources specifically estimate that existing tariffs could impact their Q2 2025 operating profit by maybe EUR 20-30 million. And of course, global conflicts add layers of uncertainty for any multinational.
Yeah, unpredictable world. And this market is just notoriously price sensitive, isn't it?
Extremely. The sources mention an elasticity of 1.7 in 2023, which basically means a 1% price change results in a 1.7% change in demand. Very sensitive.
Wow.
And clients expect annual price reductions, often in the range of 8-12%, plus significant bulk discounts on top of that.
Constant pressure on margins.
Absolutely. And on top of that, just keeping up requires massive R&D investment. The source cited $4.4 billion in 2022 alone for Nokia's R&D spend.
Huge number.
Right. The innovation treadmill is expensive.
Oh.
And then there's navigating complex regulatory compliance in over 130 countries. The sources estimate certification costs can run from $5 million to $50 million per product. That adds significant cost and complexity.
That's staggering. And the sources also explicitly point back to those legacy issues from the mobile phone era, don't they?
Yeah. They do. Underestimating software, being complacent perhaps during the dominant years, being reluctant to cannibalize their own profitable legacy products, and perceived leadership shortcomings at the time. These past mistakes are framed as a constant reminder of the need for extreme agility and strategic foresight now.
Right. It really underscores why the current management's intense focus on adaptation and execution is so critical they can't afford to repeat history.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot to something that really sets Nokia apart now. Bell Labs. This, legendary research arm came into Nokia through the Alcatel-Lucent acquisition back in 2016.
Yeah, bringing Bell Labs into Nokia was seen as a strategic coup at the time. The goal was clearly to create an unparalleled R&D powerhouse, expand Nokia's technological reach, especially in the US and China via Alcatel-Lucent's footprint, and really position them at the forefront of the next wave of technologies like IoT and cloud.
Bell Labs just has this incredible, almost mythical history, doesn't it? It's often called the Idea Factory. It honestly feels like they invented half the modern world sometimes.
In terms of foundational communication and computing technologies, that's probably not far off. Bell Labs researchers have been behind or significantly involved in, well, nearly every critical tech milestone of the last century. It's quite staggering.
Okay, give us some examples. What are some of the most impactful inventions that came out of Bell Labs, according to the sources?
Okay, well, how about the transistor in 1947, the absolute building block of all modern electronics?
Right, fundamental.
Or Claude Shannon's information theory in 1948, which is fundamental to all digital communication, the internet, everything. The laser in 1958, used everywhere today, from Blu-ray players to fiber optics.
Incredible stuff.
They were pioneers in computing and communications, too. The UNIX operating system in 1968, which underlies most of the internet servers and even smartphones today, they had the first conceptual idea for cellular communications way back in 1947.
Wow, 47.
Yeah, and ran the first public trial of a cellular phone system in 1978. More recently, fundamental work on MIMO in 2001 and Massive MIMO in 2014. Those are crucial for boosting wireless capacity in 4G and 5G.
That is just an absolutely mind-blowing list of contributions. No wonder they've racked up, what, 10 Nobel Prizes, 5 Turing Awards?
Emmys, Grammys, even an Academy Award for technical achievement. It's an unparalleled legacy of innovation.
And remarkably, Nokia Bell Labs celebrates its 100th centennial in 2025, a century of continuous fundamental innovation.
Quite a milestone.
So this isn't just history, though. How is this legendary engine driving Nokia's future now? What cutting-edge research are they focused on today?
So Bell Labs is really spearheading research into technologies that will define the next decade and beyond. They are heavily involved in 6G research, for instance, even leading the EU's flagship Hexa-X initiative.
Okay, 6G. What's the timeline and what's different?
Well, commercial deployment is probably expected around 2030, but the standardization phase, where the basic rules get decided, is likely starting in 2025. And their vision for 6G isn't just about faster speeds, it sounds much more transformative. They see 6G fundamentally integrating AI and machine learning from the ground up, not just sort of layered on top like in 5G. It will likely use new spectrum bands, maybe up into the terahertz range, for truly extreme data rates, well over 100 gigabits per second, potentially.
Wow.
And they're pioneering this concept they call network sensing.
Ah, the networks that sense, think, and act idea again. What exactly does network sensing mean in practice?
It's about the network itself becoming aware of its physical environment. Using the high-frequency signals it transmits, the network could potentially sense things like weather patterns in real time, detect obstacles without dedicated sensors, or gather incredibly detailed data to help build a dynamic digital twin of the physical world.
So the network itself becomes a sensor, like a sixth sense.
Kind of. Think of it as the network having a digital sixth sense, as the sources put it. It's really pushing the boundaries of what a network can do.
That's fascinating. What other areas are they exploring?
AI integration is absolutely central, as we mentioned, for 6G, but also across Nokia's current portfolio. They're working hard on AI-powered networks to optimize performance, manage complexity, improve energy efficiency. They've even established an AI RAN center in Dallas focused on integrating AI deeply into the radio access network. This AI focus is also key to achieving their sustainability targets, like making base stations much more energy efficient.
Okay, makes sense. And quantum technologies. That always sounds like pure science fiction.
Well, the research here is aimed at potentially radical transformations down the line. Things like developing quantum electromagnetic field sensors for incredibly precise medical imaging, far beyond what's possible today, or exploring topological quantum computers.
That's topological quantum computer.
Yeah, these could theoretically simulate hypercomplex systems that are impossible for even the biggest supercomputers today. Think potential applications in areas like drug discovery or material science. Very long-term, very fundamental research.
Got it. And they're not just looking inwards or downwards, but upwards too, with space communication.
Correct. They're working on the communication building blocks needed for the burgeoning space economy and future missions, including, a potential sustained human presence on the moon.
Seriously. Nokia on the moon.
Well, the communications part. They're developing technologies like free space optics using lasers for communication to enable potentially terabit per second links to geosatellites and maybe even 100 Gbps links between Earth and the moon, extending connectivity far beyond our planet.
Amazing. And, as we mentioned, sensing as a core part of 6G, integrating sensing and communication.
Right, contributing to that digital twin capability we talked about. And finally, sustainability. This is deeply embedded in Bell Labs' design philosophy and Nokia's overall strategy. Developing energy-efficient technologies using AI for optimization, these are critical for achieving their ambitious decarbonization targets, like net zero emissions across their value chain by 2040.
And that aligns perfectly with the growing focus on ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors for investors too, right?
Absolutely. It's becoming increasingly important.
So the insight here seems crystal clear. Bell Labs isn't just some historical artifact or a museum piece. It's a vibrant, cutting-edge research engine that is absolutely critical to Nokia's future. It's driving standards, generating the fundamental technology that will power their next generation of products, and giving them a real edge.
Precisely. It's a unique competitive advantage in this industry, no doubt about it.
Now let's talk about that major macro opportunity we hinted at earlier. The sources paint a picture of a really dramatic geopolitical shift, particularly in Europe, that's leading to a significant surge in defense spending.
Yeah, this is a massive tailwind that is genuinely changing the landscape. Russia's invasion of Ukraine served as a very stark wake-up call, prompting European nations to reverse decades of declining defense budgets that pretty much followed the end of the Cold War.
The numbers cited are quite striking. The sources show EU defense spending rising from around $218 billion in 2021 to an estimated $326 billion in 2024.
Huge jump.
And projections suggest potentially another $100 billion increase by 2027. It's a significant reversal from a low point of just 1.1% of GDP back in 2014.
And you also have the NATO commitment, the new defense investment pledge from 2023, urging members to spend a minimum of 2% of GDP annually on defense. That's gaining real traction now. 23 of NATO's 32 members are expected to meet or exceed that benchmark in 2024.
Plus, the European Commission launched its Rearm EU initiative in March 2025. That aims to mobilize $800 billion this decade, specifically shifting focus towards joint procurement and R&D, not just spending more on personnel.
Right. And this increased public investment isn't just seen as a response to security threats. Some view it potentially as a countercyclical driver, helping to offset some of the weakness we've seen in commercial markets and also fostering deeper integration within the European defense industry itself.
So how is Nokia positioned to potentially benefit from this surge in spending?
Well, Nokia actually has some relevant history here. They were involved in supplying military equipment in Finland back in the 1970s. Building on that foundation, they are now strategically positioned to capitalize on the growing demand for secure, resilient, and highly reliable communication networks, exactly what defense forces and public safety agencies require.
Okay, so what kind of specific solutions are they offering for this government and defense sector?
They provide specialized offerings, things like ruggedized 5G private and tactical wireless networks designed for field deployment in harsh conditions, quantum-safe optical networking to secure sensitive data against future quantum computing threats, non-terrestrial networks, or NTNs, those communication building blocks for space and aerial platforms we mentioned, secure IP networks, and also helping militaries upgrade older TDM circuit switched networks to modern internet-based systems.
So tailored versions of their core tech for mission-critical needs.
Exactly. These are designed to meet the incredibly stringent requirements of mission-critical communications in challenging, often contested environments.
And it's not just theoretical, right? The sources list some concrete projects and partnerships they're involved in.
Yes, they're actively engaged. A notable one is with Lockheed Martin and Verizon in the U.S. They're integrating Nokia's military-grade 5G capabilities into Lockheed's 5G Dumb-IL hybrid base station.
What's the goal there?
It's crucial for advancing interoperability between commercial 5G technology and specialized military systems, ultimately improving real-time situational awareness for commanders. And the use of open standards in this work is key, as it enables faster integration of new capabilities from different vendors.
Makes sense. They also partnered with Blackned, which is a subsidiary of Rheinmetall, the big German defense contractor.
Right, that's an MOU for developing next-generation deployable tactical networks. It leverages Nokia's core 5G technology alongside Blackned's specific defense digitalization expertise to create high-performance, secure, and rapidly deployable field communication networks for soldiers.
And there was a particularly interesting test mentioned with the Finnish Defense Forces in Telia.
Ah, yes, demonstrating the world's first seamless 5G standalone, or SA, network slice handover across national borders during a Nordic military exercise.
What's the significance of that?
That validated the significant dual-use potential. Essentially, using commercial 5G infrastructure concepts like network slicing for military coalition missions that operate across different countries. Ensuring continuous, secure communication as forces move between different national networks is absolutely critical for joint operations.
Very cool. They've also delivered their Banshee tactical private wireless technology to the U.S. Marine Corps.
Correct. Providing secure communications in demanding environments, supporting the Marines' broader modernization efforts.
And showcased 5G for Arctic defense during an exercise in Norway.
Yes, the Joint Viking 2025 exercise, proving they can enable reliable communication for field personnel and interagency cooperation even in harsh, challenging Arctic conditions where traditional comms might struggle.
Okay, so the market opportunity here for secure defense communications looks pretty substantial.
It really does. The sources cite projections for the global defense communication intelligence market growing from over $23 billion in 2025 to over $40 billion by 2034.
Solid growth.
And the broader defense communications system market is forecast for even stronger growth, potentially from over $46 billion in 2024 to over $102 billion by 2032. That's a compound annual growth rate of over 10%.
Wow, so the core insight here seems to be that Nokia is smartly leveraging its deep telecom expertise and its existing commercial technology, adapting it to offer cost-effective and scalable solutions for military and public safety needs. This rising defense spending isn't just some general trend. It looks like a concrete, differentiated growth vector that Nokia is actively pursuing and seems pretty well suited to capitalize on.
It certainly adds a unique and potentially counter-cyclical layer to their overall growth story beyond the traditional, sometimes volatile telecom market cycle.
Right, so bringing it all together now, based on everything we've discussed from these sources, what does this deep dive tell us about the investment outlook and Nokia's future prospects?
Well, the investment thesis presented in the sources fundamentally rests on Nokia's seemingly successful transformation into a focused B2B technology leader. It hinges on their strong position in strategically important growth areas and also their demonstrated financial resilience in navigating some pretty tough market conditions recently.
Okay, looking at their targets and outlook. For the full year 2025, they maintain their guidance, right? Projecting comparable operating profit somewhere between EUR 1.9 billion and EUR 2.4 billion.
Correct. And free cash flow conversion, how much of that profit turns into actual cash between 50% and 80%?
So what does that outlook signal?
It seems to signal a period of continued investment to capture future growth opportunities, even while they focus on maintaining profitability and strong cash generation. Looking further out to 2026, their targets become more ambitious.
Like what?
They're targeting net sales growth faster than the underlying market, a comparable operating margin of at least 13%, and improving that free cash flow conversion to between 55% and 85%.
And they've even provided some segment margin assumptions for 2026, showing where they expect that profitability to come from.
Yes. Network infrastructure targeting a healthy 13-16% margin. Mobile networks aiming for 6-9%, reflecting maybe the competitive pressures there. Cloud and network services at 7-10%. And Nokia Technologies, the licensing arm, expected to contribute over EUR 1.1 billion in operating profit.
And they also expressed confidence in achieving a longer-term operating margin of 14%.
They did, which indicates a strong belief in their strategy's potential to drive efficiency and profitability improvements over time.
Okay, so let's quickly recap those key strategic areas where they are really betting on growth, according to the sources.
Sure. First, the enterprise segment. They have a specific plan to invest an additional $100 million annually to drive $1 billion in incremental sales just in data center IP solutions by 2028.
Okay, big focus there.
Second, leadership in future network generations like 5G advanced and eventually 6G, powered by that Bell Labs research in areas like AI RAN and the Hexa-X project. Third, expanding their optical networks business, boosted by that Infinera acquisition.
Right.
Fourth, capitalizing on their network as code platform. This enables programmable networks and new monetization opportunities, helped by the recent acquisition of a company called Rapid. Fifth, embedding sustainability throughout their operations, aligning with those ESG trends. And sixth, significantly, the expansion into the defense sector, directly benefiting from that rising global spending we just discussed.
So the investment thesis is really built on these strategic pillars.
Yeah.
But it's equally important to remember the risks we touched upon earlier. Can't ignore those.
Absolutely not. The market's cyclicality and its sensitivity to operator spending and broader macroeconomic conditions, that remains a factor. The intense competitive landscape, particularly the structural advantages of players like Huawei, poses an ongoing challenge. You can't discount that.
And profitability can clearly be pressured by things like one-time charges, as we saw in Q1 2025, and just the continuous need for that heavy R&D investment is a significant ongoing cost.
Exactly. And supply chain fragilities, geopolitical risks, including tariffs and conflicts, those are external factors that need constant, careful navigation. While their balance sheet is healthy, as we noted, solid net cash position, 3.0 billion end of Q1 2025, even if down slightly from year-end 2024, and total debt reportedly at a 5-year low. Maintaining this financial health requires disciplined management going forward.
Okay, so pulling it all together, the overall insight from the sources seems to suggest Nokia has completed a really significant and frankly necessary B2B pivot. They appear to have a strong core business and infrastructure, a world-leading innovation engine in Bell Labs, clear strategic growth areas like enterprise and future networks.
And that unique, very timely tailwind from increasing defense spending.
Right. So while significant challenges definitely persist in their core markets, and the competitive landscape is tough, the strategy outlined in the sources appears sound. And Nokia seems technologically and financially resilient enough to pursue these opportunities and hopefully drive future growth.
That seems to be the picture painted by the materials we reviewed.
Wow, what a journey we've taken though, right? Thinking about Nokia's surprising roots as a paper mill, going through its absolute reign as a mobile phone giant that everyone knew, to its current focus on everything from quantum computing research to secure defense networks. It's quite the arc.
It really highlights something interesting, doesn't it? How technological innovation is so often dual use. The foundational research and network capabilities developed primarily for commercial needs can directly enable critical advancements in areas like defense, and sometimes vice versa too. It's this constant cycle that's shaping both the digital and physical world around us.
That's a really powerful thought. How the same underlying technology connects our phones, enables massive cloud data centers, and supports secure military operations on the battlefield. It definitely makes you think about the infrastructure we rely on in a whole new light.
Or maybe consider that Bell Labs vision for network sensing and 6G we talked about. The network not just connecting things, but literally perceiving the physical environment around it to create a real-time digital twin. What could that capability unlock in the future? Across industries, public safety, maybe even our fundamental understanding of complex systems. It's fascinating to think about.
Yeah, a lot to ponder there indeed. Well, we hope this deep dive has given you a comprehensive and insightful perspective on Nokia based on the sources provided, and maybe spark some interesting questions for you to explore further on your own. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.